I spent 3 long days on that cake. And at 72, my hands aren't what they used to be. But I wasn't about to let that stop me. I had practiced those rosettes for weeks, each swirl, each delicate petal of icing, perfected. I had to get it just right. I couldn't afford to mess up. Owen's 5th birthday wasn't just any party. It was his big day, and I had promised him it would be special. James, my son, had suggested, very kindly, that Charlotte might want to order a cake from that fancy bakery downtown. You know the one, sleek, modern, expensive. The one every parent goes to when they want to impress. But I wouldn't have it. I was baking that cake. I told James, I've been making birthday cakes since before you could even walk. Let me do this one. I knew he meant well. But my cakes were something different. They weren't just cakes, they were a symbol of love, a tradition passed down from my mother. They weren't about perfection, but about the effort, the time, and the care that went into them. The morning of the party, I carefully placed that 2-tiered dinosaur cake in the back seat of my old Buick. It was one of those early spring days in Rochester when the sun was deceiving, unusually warm for this time of year. The kind of warmth that made you think you could get away with a light jacket, but inside, you knew the chill would come back sooner or later. I worried about the frosting. The buttercream had taken me hours to get smooth, just the right consistency, but in this heat? I could already see it melting, in my mind. I woke at 5 a.m. to put on the finishing touches. The fondant dinosaurs that circled the base, the tiny details, the tiny hands, the little curled tails, the jagged edges of their teeth. Owen had been obsessed with paleontology since he was 3. He could name every dinosaur, knew their diets, their habits, the periods they lived in. So, I did my homework. I spent hours making sure those little creatures were accurate. From the spiky Stegosaurus to the fierce T-Rex, every detail had to be spot on. I arrived at their house an hour early, just like I had planned. James and Charlotte had moved into a new place a couple of years ago. One of those modern homes that looked like it came out of a magazine. Big windows, open floor plans, gleaming countertops, the kind of house that made you feel small, even when you were inside it. It never felt like home to me. But it was James's dream. He had worked hard to get there. At 43, he'd made it big in his firm, and with Charlotte by his side, they were living the life they'd always imagined. I couldn't deny it, he had done well. He could afford a lifestyle that Charlotte expected. But that house, there was something cold about it. Something that never made me feel at ease. It lacked warmth, not the kind of warmth I was used to, the kind that comes from family, from old memories. "Mom, you're here." James greeted me when I arrived, his arms full of party decorations, his face a bit flushed from running around. He gave me a quick hug, and then pulled back to let me inside. He was already starting to show the signs of stress. I could see it in his eyes, the frantic, overwhelmed look of someone who has way too many things on their plate. Charlotte's still out back, setting up. The rental company delivered the wrong chairs, so she's dealing with that now. I nodded. Where should I put the cake? I asked, shifting the heavy creation in my arms. Oh, in the kitchen, I guess, James said. On the island. I carefully maneuvered through the open-concept living room. The space was all white walls, glass tables, and sleek modern furniture that didn't seem to welcome you, so much as it just made space for you. I finally made it to the kitchen, the heart of every home, though here it felt more like a showpiece. Marble countertops, stainless steel appliances that I couldn't help but think were more for display than actual use. It was spotless, too spotless. I set the cake down gently, and noticed a large white bakery box on the counter. I didn't even have to ask. I already knew what it was. "James," I said, my voice quieter now, "what's this?" He appeared in the doorway, running a hand through his thinning hair, his face creased in that familiar expression I had seen on him since he was a child, like he was about to apologize, even if he hadn't done anything wrong. "Oh, that, Charlotte ordered a backup, just in case." A backup. Just in case my cake wasn't good enough. I felt something tight in my chest, but I forced it away. I see, I said softly. Mom, it's not like that, James began, but I interrupted him before he could finish. It's fine, I said, trying to smile. 2 cakes are better than 1, right? More for everyone. I could hear Charlotte's voice as she came in from the backyard, talking rapidly into her phone. She swept through the door like a storm, moving gracefully but with purpose, her honey blonde hair pulled back tightly into a ponytail. She was stunning, as always, dressed in a cream-colored linen dress that looked effortless, flawless. I, on the other hand, was standing in my floral dress and sensible shoes, feeling like I was already past my prime. No, I specifically asked for white chairs, Charlotte snapped into the phone. This is ridiculous. The party starts in an hour. I don't care what you have to do, but this has to be fixed now. She noticed me standing there and waved, still holding her phone to her ear. I stood awkwardly by the kitchen island, feeling every bit of my age in the room. I'd spent so much time this morning, putting on makeup, fixing my silver hair, only to feel out of place in this house that wasn't mine. When she finally ended the call, she turned to me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Eleanor, you're early. I wanted to help, I said, my voice quiet. And I had to bring the cake in carefully. Her eyes flicked from the cake to the bakery box on the counter. Oh, you actually made it, she said, her tone flat. Of course I made it, I replied, a little more sharply than I intended. Like I promised James the first would. Right, yes, but, she trailed off, then forced a smile. Well, it's very homemade. That's sweet. She glanced at the bakery box. We'll put it on the dessert table, with the cupcakes and cake pops. It'll be fine. I glanced at the bakery box again. What about that one? I asked, nodding toward it. That's the main cake, she said, her voice almost too neutral. For the cutting ceremony. And the photos. The bakery did an amazing job. Wait until you see it, it has this incredible 3D T-Rex coming out of the top. A tight knot formed in my throat. I thought my cake was supposed to be the centerpiece for the photos. That's why I made it 2 tiers. It felt like a punch in the gut. Charlotte smiled, but it was all teeth. Eleanor, I appreciate the effort. I really do, but we invited Owen's whole preschool class, plus our friends and their kids. This is an important event, and your cake just isn't right for that. James, trying to play peacemaker, stepped in between us. Mom, your cake looks great. We'll use both, okay? Kids love cake. But which one will Owen blow the candles out on? I asked, my voice catching. I already knew the answer. The silence that followed said everything. I could feel the sting of her words, deep in my chest, sharper than I expected. It wasn't just about the cake anymore. It wasn't even about the party. It was about something else, something that twisted in my gut, something that had been brewing quietly for years. I forced myself to breathe, to not let the tears show. Charlotte wasn't looking at me anymore. She was already pacing, adjusting the placement of plates on the counter, her heels clicking rapidly against the tiled floor. I felt invisible. Small. Like I didn't even belong here. James, still standing between us, glanced at me nervously, as if he was afraid that something was about to snap. Mom, let's just use both cakes, okay? Kids love cake. It'll be fine. Fine. The word echoed in my head, but I didn't believe it. It wouldn't be fine. It wasn't just the cake, it was the fact that she couldn't even see what I had done. She didn't appreciate it, not really. And it hurt more than I wanted to admit. But which one will Owen blow out the candles on? My voice trembled slightly. I tried to keep it steady, but I could already hear the answer in my head. I already knew. The silence between us felt suffocating. The kind of silence where everyone pretends nothing's wrong, but you can feel the weight of it in the air, thick and choking. It was the silence of knowing that this wasn't just about a cake, it was about something deeper. Something I wasn't ready to face. I watched as James shifted uncomfortably. His lips parted as if to say something, but nothing came out. He didn't know how to fix this. Neither did I. Charlotte finally broke the silence, but it wasn't the apology I hoped for. It wasn't even an acknowledgement of my feelings. "Let's just do this," she said flatly, waving a hand toward the cakes. "We have a party to run. We'll take a few pictures, blow the candles out, and everything will be fine." Fine. That word again. I could hear Owen in the background, his little voice calling out excitedly to someone, probably James or Charlotte. "Dad! Look at the bounce house. It's huge." Owen's excitement made everything seem so small. So simple. He didn't care about the cakes. He didn't care about the party. He just wanted to have fun. He just wanted to be with the people he loved. I took a deep breath and tried to smile. I had to keep it together, for him. For Owen. He was the only reason I was even still here, the only reason I put up with all of this. But deep down, I felt like a stranger in my own family, like the bond we once had was slipping through my fingers, slowly, quietly, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. Charlotte's voice interrupted my thoughts, pulling me back into the moment. "I'll handle the rest. You can go relax, Eleanor. We'll make sure everything's taken care of." I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to step away from my own son's party, especially after what just happened. But I didn't have a choice. I wasn't welcome here. Not really. So, I nodded, giving her a tight smile, and turned away. As I walked toward the door, I heard Owen's laughter echoing in the background, and something inside of me twisted, painfully. He was happy. That's what mattered, right? I stepped outside into the backyard, the fresh air hitting my face like a slap. I wasn't sure where to go. I didn't know if I wanted to be around people. I just needed a moment, a breath. The backyard was full of vibrant decorations, dinosaur-themed banners, plates, napkins, and all sorts of party favors. Everything was perfect, just like Charlotte had wanted. But it felt fake. Like a show. A performance. There was no warmth here, no real connection. I found a quiet corner and sat down, leaning against the fence. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to collect myself, but the weight of everything pressed down on me. I could still hear the sounds of laughter and joy coming from inside, but it felt distant. Like I was on the outside, looking in. After what felt like hours, I heard footsteps approaching. I opened my eyes, expecting to see Charlotte or James, but it was Owen. His small face appeared at the corner of the yard, his eyes wide and excited. "Grandma, come see. The bounce house is so big." His voice was pure excitement, and for a brief moment, all the tension seemed to melt away. I stood up slowly, forcing a smile. I had to do this, for him. I had to be there, for him. After all, he was the one good thing in all of this. I followed him back inside, where the party was in full swing. Charlotte was in the middle of the room, directing guests, making sure everything was perfect. James was standing by the cake table, talking to one of the other parents. "Grandma. Come on. I want to show you." Owen tugged at my hand, pulling me away from the chaos. I let him lead me to the bounce house, where he immediately started jumping, his little body bouncing up and down with pure joy. I couldn't help but laugh. He looked so small, against the giant inflatable dinosaur. I joined him, my body protesting with every movement, but I didn't care. For a moment, it was just the two of us, laughing, jumping, and enjoying the simple things. For that moment, the rest of the world didn't matter. But the silence that followed Charlotte's comments still sat heavy in my chest, and I knew it would stay there for a long time. I didn't know then that this was just the beginning of something that would change everything between us. The drive back to my apartment felt longer than usual. Usually, it's just a 20-minute drive, but today? It seemed like an eternity. The streets of Rochester were quiet as dusk began to settle, the late spring sun still hanging low in the sky. I clutched the steering wheel of my old Buick, my fingers tight around it as my thoughts spiraled. I kept replaying the events of the afternoon, over and over in my mind, wondering where it all went wrong. I hadn't stayed long after the party. I couldn't bring myself to. Half of my cake still sat there on the dessert table, untouched. And when I left, I didn't bother to take it home. What would be the point? The thought of bringing that half-eaten cake back to my apartment felt like an admission of failure. I passed by the neighborhood, the quiet houses lining the streets, and my apartment building soon came into view. It was an older complex, but it was well kept, near Highland Park. I'd moved here 3 years ago, after selling the family home, following Harold's sudden death. I still couldn't quite believe he was gone. 47 years of marriage, and it ended with a heart attack, while he was out shoveling snow. I was left alone in a house that had once felt like a home, but was now nothing more than an empty space. So, I sold it. I moved into this apartment, smaller, quieter. I had told myself I'd enjoy the change, enjoy the simplicity of it all. I thought I'd be spending a lot of time with James and Owen, but instead, I found myself spending more and more time alone. Just like tonight. I parked in my spot, the engine of my Buick sputtering to a stop, but I didn't move. I sat there for a moment, too drained to do anything. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. A text from James. "Sorry about today, Mom. Owen loved your cake. He's already asking when you'll visit next." At least I still mattered to him. At least Owen still wanted me around. I texted back a quick reply, but it felt hollow. I could feel the emptiness in me, a sharp ache in my chest that I didn't want to face, but I did. I had to. I got out of the car and nodded at Mrs. Peterson from 3B, who was checking her mail in the lobby. She smiled at me, but there was something about her expression that didn't sit right. "Eleanor, you look exhausted," she said kindly. "Wasn't it Owen's birthday today?" I forced a smile, though it didn't quite reach my eyes. "Yes, it was quite the event." "Those big parties can be overwhelming," I said, trying to make light of it. "My daughter does the same thing, hires photographers, entertainers, the works." "Whatever happened to just having cake in the backyard with a few friends?" Mrs. Peterson nodded sympathetically. "Times change, I suppose." "Yeah, they certainly do," I muttered, almost under my breath. We exchanged a few more pleasantries before she asked, "Are you coming to book club on Wednesday? We're discussing that mystery novel." The invitation was small, but it felt like a lifeline. "I'll be there," I promised, grateful for the distraction. It was a reminder that I still had a life outside of being a grandmother, a life that didn't revolve around the party that had just broken my heart. Upstairs in my apartment, I kicked off my shoes and collapsed into my favorite armchair. The one Harold and I had bought when we first got married. It was worn in all the right places, soft, comfortable, a reminder of the life we shared. A life that now felt like it belonged to someone else. I glanced at the side table where a stack of papers sat waiting for my attention, bank statements, investment reports, and the monthly letter from my accountant. Harold had always been meticulous about our finances. He worked as a bank manager for over 30 years, and he had made sure everything was in order before he passed. He had invested wisely, left me comfortable. I had no financial worries, something I knew made me fortunate compared to many of my friends. My teacher's pension, along with Harold's savings and investments, meant I could live without stress. But lately, the money felt like a burden. Like it was all that mattered to James and Charlotte. I reached for the stack of papers, thinking I might as well review them before bed, when my phone rang again. James's name flashed on the screen. "Hello, Mom." His voice sounded strained, almost apologetic. "I just wanted to check that you got home okay, and to apologize for today." "I'm fine, James," I said, trying to sound cheerful, though it came out flat. "You don't need to apologize. It was a lovely party, really. The cake situation was nothing." Owen had a wonderful time, and that's what matters. I forced the words out, though they felt heavy. There was a long pause on the other end, and I could hear James exhale audibly. Charlotte feels bad about what happened, he said, his voice almost embarrassed. Does she? I asked, the bitterness slipping out before I could stop it. She does, Mom. She's just particular about how she wants things. You know that. I did know that. Charlotte had always been like this, exact, meticulous, obsessive about the smallest details. From the wedding she planned down to the minute, to the exact shade of gray she had painted their living room walls. 3 samples had been tested before she found the right one. It's fine, James. Really, I said, trying to smooth things over. But my heart wasn't in it. Actually, there was something else I wanted to talk to you about, he said, his voice suddenly more serious. It's a bit awkward. I felt a knot form in my stomach. What is it? I asked, trying to brace myself. Well, you know that Charlotte left her job at the marketing firm when Owen started preschool, right? I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Yes. She wanted to be more present for him. I remember. Right. And it's been great for Owen having her home, but we've had to adjust to living on just my income. And with the new house and all the expenses. I felt my heart tighten. I already understood where this was going. James, are you having financial difficulties? You know I'd be happy to help. I heard him sigh, the frustration clear in his voice. That's just it, Mom. We're not in trouble, exactly, but things are tighter than we'd like. Charlotte has expensive tastes, and we've gotten used to a certain lifestyle. What do you need? I asked directly, already dreading the answer. We've been thinking. Since you're doing so well with Dad's investments and your pension, maybe you could help us out on a regular basis. Nothing major, just to ease the pressure a bit. I thought about Charlotte's designer clothes, their luxury SUV, the extravagant party for Owen. What do you have in mind? I asked, my voice cold despite myself. Maybe you could add Charlotte as an authorized user on one of your credit cards. Just for emergencies, and things for Owen. The request hit me like a punch. An authorized user meant that Charlotte could spend freely, and I'd be responsible for the payments. I had no idea where this was headed, but I didn't like it. I'd need to think about that, James. Maybe we could set up a monthly transfer instead, something with clear boundaries. The credit card would just be easier, he pressed. That way, if Owen needs something urgently, or there's a good opportunity for him, Charlotte wouldn't have to wait to ask you for money. I wondered whose idea this really was. Let me sleep on it, okay? We can talk tomorrow. Of course, Mom. Take your time, he said. Thanks for understanding about today. Charlotte really does appreciate everything you do for Owen. When we hung up, I sat back in the growing darkness of my apartment. Harold would have had strong opinions about this. He'd always believed in financial independence, had taught James to live within his means. But Harold wasn't here anymore. And now, I was left wondering if helping financially would make me more valuable to my son and his wife. Would it bring me closer to Owen? The next morning, I didn't waste any time. I called my bank. I'd already made up my mind. Melanie was going to be added as an authorized user on my primary credit card, the one with the highest limit and the best rewards. It seemed like the simplest solution. A quick fix, a way to make everything work. But it didn't feel simple inside. It felt heavy. The customer service representative walked me through the process efficiently, as if she did this every day. The additional card will be mailed to your address within 5 to 7 business days, she said, her voice polite, almost rehearsed. Would you like to set a separate credit limit for the authorized user? I hesitated. My gut twisted at the thought of setting any limits. I didn't want to send the wrong message, but I also didn't want to feel like I was just another source of money for them. No, I said, forcing my voice to stay even. That won't be necessary. She didn't press the issue. Very well, Mrs. Wilson. Is there anything else I can help you with today? No, thank you. That's all. I hung up, my heart still heavy with a feeling I couldn't shake. I called James immediately after. My fingers gripped the phone tightly as I listened to it ring. It's done, I said when he picked up. Melanie's card should arrive next week. There was a pause on the other end, and I could almost hear the weight of his relief. Really, Mom? Wow. Thank you. This is going to help us a lot. I'm happy to do it, I said, and for the first time in a while, I actually meant it. I want to be helpful, James. I want to be part of your lives. You are, Mom. This means a lot to us. I ended the call and sat in silence for a moment, staring at the wall in front of me. I wasn't sure what I was expecting. Was this really what would bring us closer? Was this really the key to fixing everything? Or was I just buying my way into their lives? The card arrived 5 days later. I called James to let him know I'd be dropping it off that afternoon. Their house looked different in the ordinary light of a Tuesday, less intimidating without the party decorations, without the throngs of guests. It felt almost empty. The driveway was quiet, with just Melanie's Audi SUV parked outside. James must have been at work. I parked, feeling that familiar knot tighten in my stomach. I smoothed down my cardigan nervously before I got out of the car and rang the doorbell. I didn't know what I was expecting, but what I got wasn't much better. Melanie opened the door. She stood there for a second, her face lighting up in surprise, then shifting into a more polite, neutral expression when she saw me. Eleanor, hi. James isn't home yet. I know. I came to drop this off, I said, holding up the envelope containing her new credit card. Her face brightened immediately. Oh, the card. That's wonderful. Come in, please. She stepped aside to let me in, and I followed her through the immaculate house. Not a toy out of place. Not a speck of dust. It was the kind of place that looked like a show, a perfectly curated display of a life that didn't feel real to me. We went into the kitchen, where she was preparing what looked like a complicated salad. The vegetables were arranged in neat rows for chopping, and everything looked so precise. Perfect. Would you like some tea? She asked, her voice soft but distant, as she turned on the kettle. That would be nice, thank you. I set the envelope on the counter while she worked, and the silence between us felt thick. I could see the way she carefully arranged the vegetables, every motion deliberate and controlled. I wondered, for the briefest moment, if I had ever really been a part of this. When the kettle clicked off, she poured the tea and set the mug in front of me. I stared at it for a moment, trying to calm the storm in my chest. The credit limit is quite generous, I said, breaking the silence. I thought it would be useful for Owen's expenses and emergencies, like James mentioned. She nodded without looking up from the tea. It will be. Thank you, Eleanor. This is very kind of you. Her voice was polite, but there was a strange formality to her gratitude that felt almost rehearsed. As if she had said these words 1,000 times, practiced in front of a mirror. But I pushed it aside. This was supposed to be a peace offering. A way to be useful. A way to finally fit in. How is Owen? I asked, desperate to change the subject. Has he recovered from all the excitement of the party? He's good. He's at a playdate right now, she replied, not looking at me. His friend's mother will be dropping him off in an hour. I nodded, unsure of what else to say. She slid the envelope open, taking out the credit card and studying it carefully. This will make things so much easier for us, she said. David's been working so hard, and with me staying home with Owen, it's been an adjustment. I wanted to say something. To let her know how I felt about all this. But instead, I simply nodded. I understand, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Family comes first. She smiled then, the first real smile I'd seen from her all day. Exactly, she said. And now we can get Owen that membership to the Children's Science Center he's been asking about. Did you know they have a whole paleontology program for kids his age? That sounds wonderful, I said, genuinely pleased. He'd love that. And they have this amazing summer camp too, but it's quite expensive. Well, now we can consider it, without stressing about the budget, she said, tucking the credit card into her wallet. I smiled, feeling a little lighter. At least my contribution was going toward something good. Toward Owen. I'd love to hear all about it when he goes. Of course, she said, her voice softening. We really do appreciate this, Eleanor. It makes me feel more secure knowing we have this backup. We chatted for a few more minutes, about Owen's activities, about James's work, but soon, it was time for me to go. As she walked me to the door, Melanie surprised me with a hug. This means more than you know, she said, her voice sincere. You're helping us give Owen the best possible childhood. As I drove home, a strange feeling washed over me. It was a mixture of relief and uncertainty. Of knowing that maybe, just maybe, this financial arrangement could finally bridge the gap between us. Maybe it would create a bond where there had only been polite tolerance. Maybe Melanie would finally see me for what I could offer, for what I had always wanted to offer. A place in their family. The drive home was quieter than usual. The usual hum of the engine, the familiar roads, all seemed to blend together in a blur of thoughts and emotions I couldn't quite place. I felt conflicted. Relief washed over me, yes, a sense of having done something positive for them. But beneath it, there was that nagging uncertainty. Was I doing the right thing? Was this the right way to prove my worth to my son and his family? I tried to shake off the doubt. I told myself this was just a step, just one small piece of the puzzle that might finally create a real connection, a bond. The kind I had been longing for all this time. Maybe Charlotte would finally see me as more than just a mother-in-law. Maybe I could finally have a real place in their lives. A place I had been fighting for ever since they moved into that cold, modern house. A place where I was valued for more than just what I could provide. But even as I thought that, a small voice inside me whispered doubts. Was it really about proving my worth? Was it about the money, or was it about something deeper? Something more lasting? The answer, I wasn't sure yet. I parked in the same spot as usual. My apartment felt quieter tonight, emptier somehow. I had never been one to feel lonely in a house full of memories, but tonight was different. I shut off the engine and sat there for a long time, just staring at the darkening street. The world seemed to have slowed down, as though everything was waiting. Waiting for something to change, something to shift. I finally made my way upstairs to my apartment, taking each step slowly, as if the weight of the day was sinking in with every movement. I let myself inside and tossed my purse on the couch. I kicked off my shoes and sank into the armchair, Harold's chair. The one we bought together when we first moved in. It was worn in all the right places, just like the memories. I let out a deep breath, wishing for his presence beside me, his steady hand on mine, as it had always been. But he wasn't here. He wouldn't be here. I glanced at the stack of financial papers on the side table, the bank statements, the investment reports, and a letter from my accountant. I knew they were all in order, Harold had made sure of that. I didn't have to worry about money. But, now, it felt like everything had changed. As though my role in this family was defined by how much I could offer them, financially. I reached for the papers, but the phone buzzed on the table beside me. It was a message from James. I know you're probably busy, but I just wanted to say thank you again. Mel and I both really appreciate everything you're doing. I know it's a lot to ask. I stared at the text for a moment before I responded. It's fine, James. I just want to be a part of your life. A real part of it. For Owen's sake. I sent the message and set the phone down. The thought of being part of their lives still lingered. But it didn't feel the same anymore. This wasn't just about being there for Owen. This was about something deeper, about not being pushed aside, about finding my place again. The phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Charlotte. Hi Eleanor, I hope everything's going well. Just wanted to check in and say thank you for the card. It really does make a difference. I know it's not always easy, and we appreciate your help more than you know. Her words were polite, almost too polite. But it felt distant. It wasn't the warmth I was hoping for. It wasn't the connection I had dreamed about. It felt like a transaction. I sighed and set the phone down. Was this what I had wanted? Was this the bridge I had been trying to build between us? I wasn't sure anymore. I picked up the financial statements and began scanning them, though my mind wasn't on the numbers. Instead, I found myself thinking about the last conversation James and I had, about him asking for help, about the subtle pressure in his voice as he suggested the credit card. He wasn't asking for money. Not really. But it felt like a line was being drawn, a line I wasn't sure I was ready to cross. Later that evening, as I sat in the quiet of my apartment, I started thinking about the decision I had made. Adding Charlotte as an authorized user. Was that the right choice? Would it fix things between us, or had I just set myself up for more manipulation? And then there was Owen. Sweet, innocent Owen. He had been the light in this whole mess. Every time I saw his face, all the anger and confusion seemed to fade. For him, I would do anything. Even if it meant sacrificing my own peace, my own happiness. But I wasn't sure anymore if it was enough just to do things for Owen. Was I doing this for him? Or was I doing it to finally feel like I belonged? The next morning, I woke up with a sense of dread in the pit of my stomach. Thanksgiving was right around the corner, and it was clear that everything was still hanging in the air. I hadn't heard from James in days, and the silence between us felt louder than any conversation could. I was trying my best to keep my mind off it, focusing on the sweet potato casserole I was preparing for the holiday dinner. But it wasn't easy. How could it be? I stood in my kitchen, stirring the casserole and thinking about the conversation I knew was coming. I could almost feel it approaching, like a storm on the horizon. The text from James earlier that morning made my heart race. Mom, can we talk? Was this the moment he would finally accept my boundaries? Would he respect the decision I had made, or would he ask for more? More from me. More from the person I didn't want to be anymore, the one who just gave in for the sake of peace. My hands trembled slightly as I tried to push these thoughts aside, forcing myself to focus on the task at hand. Thanksgiving was coming. I had to get ready for it. Even if it was going to be a holiday spent without James and Owen. Just as I set the casserole aside, my phone rang, pulling me back from my thoughts. The number on the screen was unfamiliar. I hesitated, wondering who it could be. My pulse quickened, but I answered anyway. Hello? Barbara, this is George Henderson. Melanie's father, came the voice on the other end, smooth and confident, but there was an urgency to it that made my stomach twist. I believe we need to talk. Can you meet me tomorrow morning at 9, at the Highland Park Diner? It's about David and Melanie. And I think you'll want to hear what I have to say. I stared at the phone in disbelief. George Henderson. Melanie's father. The man who had always treated me with cordial indifference, at best. Why on earth was he reaching out to me now? Especially with Thanksgiving just a day away. Despite the unease gnawing at me, I typed a quick response. I'll be there. The next morning, the diner was nearly empty. I spotted George immediately, a man of presence, impeccably dressed, with silver hair combed back neatly. He sat at a corner booth, sipping his black coffee, his expression serious. I felt a strange sense of discomfort as I approached and slid into the seat across from him. Thank you for coming, Barbara, he said, his voice steady. I'll get straight to the point. I know about the credit card situation. I blinked, taken aback. Melanie told you? No, he replied, shaking his head. I found out when I was helping them refinance their mortgage last month. They're drowning in debt, Barbara. Huge credit card balances, personal loans, and a second mortgage they didn't tell you about. My mind raced as I tried to process his words. I had no idea it was that bad. I had never imagined the extent of their financial struggles. George's face was grim as he continued. Melanie has always lived beyond her means, he said quietly. When she married David, I thought he'd be the stabilizing influence. Instead, he's been dragged into her financial chaos. I was stunned. Why are you telling me this? My voice was barely above a whisper, trying to wrap my head around everything he was saying. Because they're using you, George said plainly. And it's wrong. Diane and I have bailed them out twice already. But we refuse to do it a third time. That's when they turn to you. The sting of his words hit me harder than I expected. I tried to keep my voice steady as I asked, have you spoken to them about this? I tried, George said with a deep sigh. But they won't listen. So here's my proposition. He leaned in, his gaze sharp. I've arranged for a financial counselor. Someone who specializes in families with spending problems. If they agree to work with her, Diane and I will help them with their immediate debts. But they need consequences this time. I swallowed hard, my heart beating fast. What do you need from me? Stand your ground, George said, his voice firm. Don't give them unrestricted access to your money. And if they cut you off from Owen. He slid a business card across the table. My attorney. I'll back you in seeking grandparent visitation rights. I stared at the card in my hand, feeling a tremor run through me. You'd really do that? I would, George said without hesitation. Tyler deserves his grandmother. And they need to understand that emotional blackmail isn't acceptable. 3 days later, I got a call from James. His voice sounded subdued, quieter than usual. Dad says you two talked, he said, almost as if he was walking on eggshells. We did. Mom, I'm sorry. Things got out of hand. Mel and I have agreed to see that financial counselor. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, a relief I wasn't sure I had the right to feel. I'm glad to hear that. And, we want you to come for Christmas, James continued. No strings attached. The words were like music to my ears. I'd like that very much, I replied, my heart feeling lighter than it had in weeks. James paused for a moment, then added. There's one more thing. Tyler's been asking about you. Would you be able to take him to the dinosaur exhibit this weekend? Just the two of you? Tears welled in my eyes. Of course, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I'd love nothing more. As I hung up the phone, I knew our issues weren't magically fixed. There were still difficult conversations ahead. Trust needed to be rebuilt. Boundaries had to be maintained. But for now, I felt a flicker of hope. For now, knowing I would see my grandson again, was enough. Sometimes love means standing firm, even when it breaks your heart. And sometimes, unexpectedly, that's exactly what a family needs to heal. A few days before Thanksgiving, I found myself driving to the museum with Owen, my mind a mixture of hope and doubt. The city had that soft autumn chill in the air, the kind that made you pull your sweater a little tighter and breathe in the fresh, crisp scent of fall. The trees were a burst of fiery reds and oranges, as if the world around me was signaling that change was coming. Slowly, but surely, I thought. Maybe, just maybe, my own life was beginning to change too. As I walked into the exhibit with Owen by my side, I saw the excitement light up his face. It was like a fire had been lit inside him, as he looked up at the towering dinosaurs surrounding us. His eyes were wide with wonder, and I couldn't help but smile at how little he looked against the giant, lifelike creatures. I bent down to his level, wincing slightly as my niece protested, but I didn't care. Grandma, look at that one. Owen shouted, pointing at a T-Rex with sharp teeth and glowing eyes that seemed to almost come alive. I see it, sweetheart, I said, smiling as best as I could. That's a big one, isn't it? His small hand gripped mine tightly, and we wandered through the exhibit, Owen bouncing from one display to the next, asking 1,000 questions about every dinosaur. His voice was full of curiosity, and I did my best to answer, though half the time, I simply listened to him, amazed by how much he was absorbing at such a young age. "Grandma, can we get a picture by the T-Rex?" Owen asked eagerly, as we approached the centerpiece of the exhibit. "Of course," I said, nodding as we posed. I could feel a shift within me. The ache in my heart, the one that had been there for so long, began to fade. It was as though, for that one brief moment, I was truly a part of his world. Not just a visitor. Not just someone who popped in and out of his life. I was there. I was his grandma. And that was enough. The day flew by. We explored more exhibits, looked at fossils, and played with the interactive displays that Owen loved so much. By the time we were leaving the museum, I felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Not just because we had spent the day together, but because for the first time in a long while, I felt like I had made the right choice. I had stood my ground, and it had paid off. I was in Owen's life. Not just in the background, but here. Now. As we got to the car, I was about to buckle him in when Owen looked up at me, his innocent face full of longing. "Grandma, when are you coming over again?" His voice was soft, and it broke something inside me. I knelt down to his level, cupping his face gently in my hands. I tried to push back the tears that threatened to spill over. "I miss you too, sweetheart," I whispered. "I'll be over soon. We'll spend more time together, okay?" Owen nodded seriously, then wrapped his small arms around me in a big hug. "I love you, Grandma." "I love you too, Owen," I whispered, fighting the tears that were starting to well in my eyes. "More than you know." As I drove away, I couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed since that first conversation with Charlotte and James. The path hadn't been easy, and I still had my doubts. But this moment, this perfect, simple moment with Owen, was worth everything. That evening, I settled into my favorite chair, cradling a cup of tea in my hands. The warmth of the mug spread through me, but it didn't quite reach the coldness I felt inside. The phone buzzed, breaking the stillness. It was a text from James. "Mom, I'm glad we've been able to talk more. Mel and I have been thinking about everything, and we want to move forward with things being better between us. We both know you've made some hard decisions, and we respect that. I just wanted to say thank you for what you did for Owen. It really meant a lot to him, and to us." I read the message several times, letting the words sink in. For the first time in weeks, a weight lifted off my chest. I had stood firm. Kept my boundaries. And it had made a difference. I wasn't sure what would come next, but I knew one thing for certain. I had done what I needed to do. I had made the right choice, for myself, and for Owen. I put my phone down, letting out a long, steady breath. Things weren't perfect. There was still so much to work through. But for the first time in a long while, I felt like there was a chance. A chance for something better. For all of us. This wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter. And I was ready to see where it would take us. December crept in quietly, with snowflakes dancing outside my window like little whispers of peace. Rochester in winter had always been beautiful, but lonely. Still, I found myself adjusting, not just to the cold, but to the changes unfolding in my life. Owen called more often now. Sometimes just to say hi, sometimes to tell me about a dinosaur fact he had learned. Each call felt like a small miracle, a thread being woven back into the fabric of something I thought was unraveling. I didn't push. I didn't ask to visit. I simply waited, and somehow, that quiet patience began to shift things. On the second Sunday of the month, James invited me over for brunch. "Just the three of us," he said, his voice softer than I remembered. I brought my cranberry muffins, warm from the oven. When I arrived, Owen ran to the door, throwing his arms around my waist. "Grandma." That word still melted something inside me. Melanie stood in the kitchen, pouring juice. She looked up and gave me a small smile, not forced this time, not distant. "The muffins smell amazing," she said, and I noticed the table was set for 3. That simple gesture meant more than any apology could. We sat down. James asked about my holiday plans. Owen talked about his science project. Melanie refilled my tea without hesitation. For the first time in a long time, we were just family. No undercurrents. No tension. Just warmth and quiet understanding. After the meal, Owen tugged my hand. "Can I show you my dinosaur book?" "Of course," I said, smiling. We sat together on the living room rug, flipping through pages, his small voice narrating facts with excitement. At one point, he leaned against me, his head resting lightly on my shoulder. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just held that moment. Because after everything, after all the silence, the distance, the pain, this was what I had been longing for. Connection. Not through gifts, not through obligations, but through presence. Through love. Later, as I was leaving, Melanie walked me to the door. "Thank you for giving us space," she said, her voice lower now. "And thank you for standing firm." I looked at her, surprised. I wasn't sure what the right thing was, I admitted. "You did the right thing," she said softly. "We just weren't ready to see it yet." I nodded, feeling something unspoken settle between us. Not quite friendship. Not quite forgiveness. But something new. Something better. As I stepped outside, snow crunched beneath my boots. The world felt colder, but I felt warmer. Not everything was fixed. But we were moving forward. Slowly. Gently. Together. Christmas morning arrived with a quiet stillness, the kind that only comes when the world is blanketed in snow and peace. I woke up early, the way I always had, and brewed a pot of tea before settling into my chair by the window. The streets were empty, the rooftops dusted in white, and for once, I didn't feel the familiar ache of loneliness. I wasn't spending the day alone. I had been invited. Truly invited. James had called 2 nights before. "We want you to come over early," he said. "Owen wants you to help him open his presents." My heart had clenched, not in pain this time, but in something like gratitude, relief. I had wrapped Owen's gift carefully, a handmade scrapbook filled with dinosaur stickers, adventure maps, and photos of our museum visit. It wasn't expensive. But it was full of love. When I arrived, Owen was already waiting by the door, pajama-clad and full of energy. "Grandma. You came." He jumped into my arms, and I held him tight, inhaling the sweet scent of cinnamon from his hair. Melanie greeted me with a warm smile. "Merry Christmas, Eleanor. Coffee?" "I'd love some," I replied, and we shared a quiet look of mutual peace. There were no grand gestures. No long speeches. Just a table set with care. A child glowing with joy. And the soft, steady rhythm of something real being rebuilt. Owen tore into his presents with delight, pausing only when he opened mine. "It's us," he said, flipping through the scrapbook. "This is our dinosaur day." "It is," I whispered, blinking back tears. "I thought you'd like to remember it." He hugged the book to his chest and grinned. "Best present ever." I glanced up and saw James watching me. His expression was soft, grateful. He didn't say anything, just nodded. That was enough. After brunch, I helped Melanie clear the table. We moved in a quiet rhythm, like 2 people who had found a tentative understanding. "I wanted to tell you something," she said, drying a dish. "I spoke to the financial counselor. She's helping." "I'm glad," I said, meaning it. "We're not perfect," she added. "But I'm trying to be better, for Owen, for James, for myself." I paused, then placed a clean plate gently on the rack. "That's all anyone can do," I said quietly. She looked at me then, really looked. "Thank you, for holding the line." I didn't understand it at first. But I do now. I smiled, not out of triumph, but something softer. Something close to healing. Later that evening, as I walked home under the fading glow of Christmas lights, I felt lighter. Not because everything was fixed, but because something had shifted. Respect. Balance. Love, not out of obligation, but because it was chosen, again and again. I paused at the corner near my apartment, watching the snow drift down beneath the street lamp. I thought of Harold. Of the quiet strength he had always shown. Of the way he would have smiled at this new chapter. I whispered into the cold air. We're okay now, finally. And for the first time in a long, long while. I believed it. The new year came gently, no grand resolutions, no sweeping changes, just a quiet morning with sunlight peeking through the curtains. I poured my tea and sat by the window, watching as the snow melted from the rooftops, drip by drip, like time slowly letting go. There was peace now. Not the loud kind. Not the one that dances through fireworks or clinks in champagne flutes. But the kind that settles in your chest, the kind that feels earned. Owen came to visit often, not just when it was convenient, but because he wanted to. We built puzzles. We baked muffins. We created our own little rituals, moments stitched together like a quilt of new memories. James called every few days, sometimes with updates, sometimes with nothing to say at all, just checking in. Melanie, too, began to soften. Our conversations grew less cautious, more genuine. She even invited me to one of her book club meetings. I said yes. Not because I wanted to belong, but because, slowly, I already did. One afternoon, as I walked through the park with Owen, his mittened hands swinging in mine, he looked up at me and asked, "Grandma, were you ever a little girl like me?" I laughed, not at the question, but at the perfect innocence behind it. "Yes, sweetheart," I said, brushing snow from his hat. "A long time ago." "Did you have a grandma too?" "I did," I smiled. "And she used to make me tea and tell me stories." He paused, thinking hard. "Did she love you?" The question stopped me. I looked down at him, his big eyes waiting for an answer that felt both simple and sacred. "Yes," I said, my voice catching. "She loved me very much." He grinned, satisfied. "Good. Because I love you like that too." And in that moment, in the middle of the snowy path, surrounded by bare trees and the sound of distant laughter, I knew. Everything I had gone through, the silence, the boundaries, the aching heart, had been worth it. Not because I had won. Not because I had given in. But because I had stayed true. To myself. To Owen. To the kind of love that doesn't need conditions or control, just presence. Just truth. And now, with a hand in mine and a future unwritten, I walked forward, not as a mother trying to hold on, but as a grandmother who had learned to let go, and, in doing so, had found everything she was looking for.